Chris, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me again. I feel honored to be a repeat.
I feel honored that you'll come back.
We'll see if I stay.
I love having you on. For those who haven't heard you on the show before, because it was a little bit ago, could you just quickly introduce yourself to those listening?
Sure. My name is Chris Goodman, and I own a coaching and consulting company called Goodman Coaching. We really worked hard, really scrambled some brains figuring out that name. Really what I do, though, is I partner with higher level business owners. I say higher level, really it's 6 and 7 figure and sometimes 8 figure business owners. And I do a mix of life coaching and business coaching. And then we also bring some consulting in on the side. And in the last episode, I won't bore you here, but in the last episode we recorded, we talked about those differences between coaching, consulting, mentoring, and how our English language just doesn't really sufficiently describe what coaching can be. So ultimately, though, what we're setting out to do is dramatically improve their life and their business, because what's money or success without happiness behind it?
That's great. I love that. What is money or success without happiness behind it? I think that's the definition of what a lot of people consider successful, is they associate it with the feeling of feeling fulfilled and happy. And the way that happens is just different for everybody. But I love it. And guys, we'll link the episode in the show notes back to Chris's other episodes, so he'll explain all of that there. I wanted to have him back on the show, though, to talk through a different dimension of coaching, which is delivering feedback and showing up as a leader in your organization, in your business, because I think that effective leaders have to have some type of coaching skill in their business. It's just, it's necessary, especially with the expectations of your team and everyone that you're managing. And I think this is something that overwhelms a lot of people. They get into the position where now they have to oversee these other people. And it's not as simple as hand them a checklist and they go get it done, right? And, and you just had an event too, where you're discussing this with business owners. Can you just kind of unpack for us what you're hearing from clients and associates on their struggles with maybe leadership and feedback?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it's inevitable. If you're growing, you are going to need either more people or a higher caliber of person, someone with a different skill set or something like that. So you're going to become somebody whose main skill set went from whatever you were doing in the business to now working on the business and working on the people in that business. So I always tease, business owners. I'm like, you're moving from checkers to chess, but the chessboard is full of completely different personalities, completely different behaviors, completely different roles. And now your job is suddenly to align all of that and also win the game. So for everybody in that position, take a breath. Like, you're not supposed to be great at this right out of the gate. You've spent however many years developing your skills to be great in your business. Now the rules have changed. So, for instance, I was talking with one of the guests at the event, and he has about a $15 to $20 million a year business. And his biggest challenge right now is not really motivating the rest of the team, but getting urgency for them to hit their goals as much as he is urgent about hitting the company's goals. And so we spent time figuring out, we actually mapped out his whole org chart and ranked everybody's performance. Now, I want you to hear my language here. It's performance. It's not their attitude. It's not what I like to go have a beer with them. It's their performance. And in the highest level of managers he has, about 40% of them were operating at a 2 out of 5. Now, if you know anybody who is really at the top of their game, they don't like to go hang out with people who are at a 2 out of 5 in their game, right? A players don't want to go play with C players, in other words. And so his job was to become the type of leader, and I'll always argue the type of coaching leader in his organization, to have a powerful conversation around those 2s and see if they will rise up to a 5. And if not, coach them out of the business, because the other 5s will start to leave if he doesn't do that. So that's where we start talking about some real simple tools and frameworks for getting that feedback loop going. And, I always explain this in terms of it has to happen immediately. And that's part of why he was at the event, because he had been kicking this can down the road for 6-7 months. And that's not fair to the rest of the team, A. B, it's not fair to the bottom line because they can do better and their customers. And it's also not fair to the person because you're not even giving them a fighting chance. So I always sum this up with, we want to create a powerful conversation around somebody and then give them the feedback and the accountability they need to step up into it. And if they don't, that's not necessarily a problem, right? Sometimes we're just getting into alignment and right-sizing the team and figuring out, okay, well, this person we thought they were a fit or they used to be a fit. And now the role has shifted or the demands have shifted and they are no longer the right person. They might go to a different seat on the bus. However, something has to give there. So you asked me what time it was, and I built you a nice watch there.
And it's the feedback within the feedback, because it's this weird like inception of it, because by delivering the feedback and by coaching them, you're going to get the feedback on what the next step is. It's actually feedback for you by communicating that, because if they're willing to step up to the plate and they're committed to it, not just in words, but in action, which you have to figure out how that can be done. I feel like that is usually it's driving the action in us as the founders, because a lot of the times we will find every excuse on the planet to be like, oh, well, like all the disadvantages that are against them, or they're a good person, or they're trying, or whatever it may be. And it's really difficult to coach them out of a role, because I think that we just want to keep everybody on the bus so badly. Why do you think that is? Or why do you think there's hesitation on, kind of making that call?
Well, I think most business owners are good people. They're good-hearted people. And the ones who are insanely passionate about what they do, they really care. And sometimes that caring by extension turns into, well, I want to keep them because that's what caring means. I don't want to take their paycheck away from them and their family. So I care. But really what we're doing is we're loving them right out of production. We're loving them right out of business. We're loving our business into the ground. And that's not love. So I think we have to shift this from, letting somebody linger and underperform as an act of love, shifting that into the most loving act I could offer them is one where I ask them to step up into their potential, and I give them resources, I give them coaching, I give them access to coaches or other seminars or trainings or conferences or whatever, all of the above, and help them step up into that. Because the term the best people on the team sounds so weird, but I'll say the highest performers always crave growth and opportunity. And if you're not giving them that, you've automatically handicapped them, the team, and all the results that are combined therein.
Yeah. And if you help the high performers thrive, they will in turn help others too. And I think that's part of it too, is investing in the high performers as opposed to investing in everything. And for me, I considered myself, when I was in corporate, I tried very hard. I was striving to be an A player, right? I was a striver. I was a high performer by all the metrics that we were measured on. And I'll tell you, there's nothing more frustrating than seeing a C player sitting next to you that sticks around. And I'm like, cool, then I can operate like that. Then I'm going to go do that because I don't feel like I'm marginally getting rewarded for the excess effort I'm putting in over this person.
Right.
So you're actually dragging down your high performers, whether you know it or not, by sending a message that you will tolerate C performance.
This is so funny. I was just coaching somebody on this yesterday, and actually I wrote it on my board. She said, when you cut the dead weight, it's amazing how quickly you rise.
Yes.
Because she had this toxic performer on her team. And I say toxic because that attitude, that low performance, and that laziness was infecting the rest of the team. And it was infecting clients. And some of the clients were leaving because of this. And then other people were talking to those clients. Why'd you leave? Well, because this, right? And so that, I say that word infect purposefully because that's exactly what was happening. As soon as they cut that out, the rest of the team was energized. And it sent a shockwave, a signal through the rest of the company, like, oh, we're actually honoring the standard that we talk about. And now they're already attracting higher, I'll say more talented candidates for other roles. This is all within 36 hours. So
I believe it. That happened to me. As soon as I brought on, not the lack of infection, but the fact that I brought in new people, it just completely, I think in about 72 hours, I was running a different business.
That's a great way to put it.
I completely see that.
Yeah. You're running a different business with different standards, The Navy SEALs, we pick on them all the time because they're the most elite in our military, or at least one of them. And, they just won't they won't tolerate. This is, if anybody's digging what we're putting down here, this is the thing to write down. You get what you tolerate, period. And if that organization is tolerating low performance, is tolerating not finding ways to create these accountability loops, these feedback loops, that's what you'll continue to get. It's just that simple. And I think once the business owner learns, or even the CEO or whoever's in charge of this conversation, once they learn how simple it is to actually lead from curiosity, from genuine compassion, and create that big conversation around people, they get out of their own way. And the team starts to do what it needs to do. I've been consulting and coaching a client for almost 3 years now. When we got started, they were at about 1.2 million in revenue. And their goal is to finish this year at 5 million in revenue. And they'll do it without losing profitability. They've added people to the team, but all of the major strides they have made have come solely through coaching and great people, and continuing what he learns as the business owner. I'm coaching him one-on-one and extending that into his highest level of leadership. So they go and they infect the rest of the team with those great principles, with those great standards. And then it just percolates down all the way to, the first tier of their organization.
I think that we underestimate influence. We underestimate the influence we have. We underestimate the influence others have. And we think that everyone is kind of operating autonomously and able to repel that influence. They're not. There's always going to be some degree of influence in there. And I want to talk about that conversation, Chris, that you just brought up, like having that conversation. One of the really tactical things I want to go through today with you is like how to have those conversations, how to deliver feedback effectively and communicate well with your team, because there are little tactics, right? We've all heard like the feedback sandwich and like how to have the conversations, like how to have tough conversations. But in reality, I don't necessarily subscribe to those things. I don't think there's one way to do anything or a template or anything like that. What's your take on it? And how do you coach people through giving effective feedback?
It's a great question. Number one, probably most important, honor your culture. So if you are a fast-paced organization that just doesn't put up with a lot of BS, or you cuss a lot or whatever, like honor your style and your culture instead of trying to force it into something else, because then you're automatically inauthentic and people can smell that a mile away. So, one of my clients is extremely fast-paced. I mean, think Porsche and Ferrari and tattoos. And everything about him is intense and fast-paced. And it would be silly for him to sit down and try to put on this like corporate, starch white shirt veil of here's how we're going to do this today and following like a checklist. That's not who he is. And that's not how he wants this organization to run. So number one, honor that. And the people who get it will be excited by that. And the people who want to run at that pace, or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you are slower, more buttoned up and purposeful in your speech. And the people who, you want to connect with and partner with will probably be on the same page. But I just see so many people trying to force this and bend this into something that it doesn't need to be. The second piece is make sure you're in rapport. Rapport is just a word to describe a state of mutual trust and respect. So a lot of business owners, especially the like, we'll say big personality business owners, right? They are not in a state of rapport when they start demanding things from their team or getting pushy about results or even getting angry with somebody about their results. So the way we do this is we just ask something like, hey, are you having fun right now? Or, hey, do you trust me? Or, hey, where are you with this? Before we get into all this, how are you? And I mean the real you. How are you really doing? And let's make sure you can't see me necessarily if you're just listening, but I'm lining up my hands in perfect alignment. Make sure we're actually locked into alignment and rapport before we move forward. Because if we don't have that, everything else is going to hit some layer of armor from the other person. Does that make sense?
It does. But also, I mean, we have to acknowledge, though, how hard it is. If you were a leader of my organization and I worked for you and you said, do you trust me? Who the hell is going to say no?
Well, if you've got great people who are, one of my favorite quotes is from Justice Brandeis. And he said, sunshine is the best disinfectant. So if there is a culture of you can be transparent. So if I really don't feel like I trust you right now because you just screamed at me for 5 minutes and then you said, do you trust me? I'm going to be like, hey, look, no, I don't right now. You're coming in too hot. So yeah, it's like, I'll often tell business owners, it's on them to go first there. So they may have to volunteer and be like, hey, look. So for instance, I was leading this event last weekend. And one of the questions in the beginning to kind of break the ice with everybody was, if you really knew me, you'd know that. And they had to fill in the blank. And I said, look, I'll go first with this. I'll be kind of vulnerable here since I'm asking you to be vulnerable. And I said, if you really knew me, you'd know that my biggest fear is letting you down today. That would just crush me if I didn't really deliver on everything I've promised. That would just gut me. And that just is one tiny little small example of where I can just put my heart on the page or on the floor here and say, look, this is a real me. You got permission to do the same. And we're going to honor that. And we're going to respect that. So yeah. And then I'll say number 3, this is probably the most overlooked but valuable practice in any size organization: consistent one-on-ones. Now, it doesn't have to be face-to-face, but it does need to be voice-to-voice. And it does need to be more frequent in the beginning because you can squash all those monsters while they're small, right? Communication issues, trust issues, performance issues, the deliverables aren't right. So the cadence needs to be faster in the beginning. And then as performance increases, you can decrease the amount of accountability and the cadence of those meetings. So for instance, if I bring on somebody brand new, they're going to meet with me almost daily in the very beginning, in the first 30 days. Even if it's for 15 minutes or even 5 minutes, they're going to meet with me that consistently. So I can say, hey, how's this going? What was your goal? How did it go? What do you need now? What resources do you think would help? How can I help you? And then lastly, most importantly, before they leave that meeting, what will you commit to? What is the one commitment that you're going to honor next time we talk? Even if it's something tiny. But I'm only asking for one thing, not 10 things, not 80 things, right? Like one, sometimes up to 3 things if they can handle it. And as that performance increases, the accountability decreases. Think about it like riding a bike. At the beginning, the training wheels are bent all the way down because your performance is so poor, right? And you don't mean to be a bad bike rider. You're just learning. You're just figuring it out. So we can have compassion and be like, these are here to help you. These are here to serve you and also protect my bike. Right?
Yes, exactly.
So yeah. So as the person continues to prove that they don't need them as much and we keep bending them up or eventually even take them off, that's great. That's great. And then we can reduce how often we meet. But if performance drops down, they keep falling over, they mess up my bike, guess what? Those wheels are going back on and getting bent all the way down if we need to. Yeah.
Yeah. But always from a place of, let me equip you with the right tools to succeed, not, you broke my bike.
Exactly. Yeah. It's not about micromanaging them into higher performance. It's about serving them and helping them. Because look, you're doing the same thing when you got catapulted into this leadership position. And now suddenly there's a whole new suite of skills that you've got to learn, like communication, coaching, leadership, things you never really had to do that well before. You don't know what you don't know. And we can turn around and have that same compassion for somebody else who is learning something new or who is struggling, or maybe they had a huge issue in their personal life and it's affecting their work. They don't know what they don't know about how to balance that. And that's why we're there, is to lead them through that.
And what I found is counteracting past cultures. They come with baggage. I'm going to speak in particular about my profession because it's very unique. It's kind of like adopting rescue dogs, where if you've worked in public accounting, then you're used to be like working till midnight, being yelled at. And one thing I had to learn with feedback, this is really interesting, is that with multiple people, if I said, hey, by when can you get this done? I was literally asking for a day or a time that was reasonable. I literally asked the question I intend to ask. What they are hearing is, get this done yesterday. Where the fuck is it?
Right. Yeah.
And because that's how Big Four partners would say that when they meant, where the F is it? why isn't it done? They would say, hey, when can you get this done? So it triggers a different language. It triggers like, oh, I didn't know you interpret this way. And then what I didn't realize was I said, I am somehow creating a sense of urgency that is not what I communicated. So it's a really interesting conversation to have where I say, I literally mean to ask the question I'm asking. And I had to figure out other ways to ask it that were not natural to me because I said, wait, it's just such a weird, like, it screws with my head a little bit to go, oh, I didn't realize that you understand something different than what I was trying to ask. I thought I was being super literal and I didn't know you could reinterpret that. So
well,
it's
communication,
crazy.
right? Like when I do like in-person trainings, I'll often put the sentence on the board. I didn't say Bob said that. And then every line under it will be every different word, every different line will be highlighted. So it's like, I didn't say Bob said that, or I didn't say Bob said that, or I didn't say Bob said that. And every single word can have a different connotation and tone that cannot be communicated by text.
Right.
So yeah, leaders have to, I'm consulting with a team right now, and this worked really well. We said, look, the only time people get upset is when their expectations are not met. So we have to get clear on what we expect of each other in terms of our communication and deadlines and all this stuff. And here's how we did it. We took everybody, put their name on a page on a Zoom call, and we put everybody's name on the page. And we said, all right, how do you win with you? How does a person win with you? Now, your drivers, your dominant personalities, they were like, you just get it done. Get it done. No excuses, just get it done, right? But that's how you win with me. I'm like, okay, now I know that for the CEO, this is how he thinks people win or what he expects. And we went through everybody. We said, how do you win with me? How do you lose with me? And then lastly, if you need to confront me, here's what I want you to do. If you need to confront me, here is specifically how I want you to communicate with me. And the results were fascinating. It was like, I want you to come in and be kind and be nice at first, but then be very clear and give me a specific example of what you're confronting me about. Don't just yell at me. Don't just tell me you want it done yesterday. Like, that's how I want you. So we basically said, look, you got the cheat codes to your whole team in one meeting.
Exactly. And it's so clear because it's saying, I want you to, and for me, it's been like, ask if I'm in a position to take feedback right now. You know, like that would be my answer is like, ask me if I'm in a position, because I very well may not be. Like I very well may say tomorrow morning would be great. Like having a day, it would be great. But also opening up the conversation on how you prefer to receive feedback, although so simple, Chris, in concept, something that we don't do enough is just openly start the conversation. How do you best receive feedback? How would you like to tell me? Or how would you like me to tell you if something's not meeting my expectations? I think that we just default to the way either we've been treated or we default to assuming that it's the same as us. And nothing could be further from the truth in my experience from managing countless teams. I'm just going, yeah, I wish when I was shoved into a managerial position at age 24 that I knew that. But the expectation, I mean, like you said, we're not trained in this necessarily. I feel like we are all learning it as we go and by experience. But my next question for you is really around, you mentioned this before, that you are kind of responsible for being the leader and the coach to the team. Mm-hmm. And especially because we don't learn this necessarily from a technical standpoint. We're really good at usually our trade or our thing that we do. And we have to become a manager in that by experience and by trial and fire. And I would love to know your advice on, do you think it makes sense for someone stepping into a leadership role to get some type of education, whether it be formal, informal certifications or so on in coaching, to learn how to communicate better? What types of ways can they enhance those skills?
My question would be, why wouldn't you? When the stakes are that high, why wouldn't you want to be at your best? And if there's a way for you, I'm always coaching my business owners or executives that you have to have something in between you and the people reporting to you. Because if it's always, one-to-one and there's no system for them to know if they're hitting the mark, you're always going to have your time compromised. You're always going to have your stress compromised because they have no other outlet to look at. So this is where, if anybody listening does like traction and EOS, they have their scorecard. They have 1 to 3 KPIs that every person on the team is responsible for. That's just one example of putting something in between you as the leader and the person that's reporting to you. And now the best do this as a way of culture. We just make it, this is just how we operate. You don't have to come straight to your leader, because first you ask, what would the leader do in this scenario? Or if I'm going to go to them, I know as a culture, we always bring 1 or 2 solutions. And if I can think of 1 or 2 solutions before I even go to them, guess what? I'm probably going to solve my own problem. So yeah, I think that's where I would start, is why wouldn't I make this investment? And if I'm not getting returns, I can always turn it off. I've done so many countless like certifications and programs and all this. And some of them I opted out at, the second or third session. I'm like, this is not hitting the mark for me. And that's okay. I didn't know what I didn't know. Now I do.
Right.
We're going to move on. One of my favorite sayings, and you'll appreciate this being in your industry, there is no return without investment. Mm-hmm. So a lot of leaders want to get in there and go, ooh, I want to be the best leader ever. But they're making no investment in themselves to have their own powerful leader, a coach, a consultant, both, several coaches. I have three coaches right now, I think, because that investment must be made if you want to get major returns.
I completely agree. But that investment can be literally money, could be time, anything, focus, priority, because I think it's imperative to enhance skills in that area. And even my mentors have recommended, like, Shannon, you should go get a coaching certification if you're going to be working as a CFO with clients and you're going to be advising them. Mm-hmm. Even enhancing your skills in the trade that you're in, if you're a service provider, especially working with clients. But also what it has served me on is communicating with my team. Absolutely. And it served me to just be a better communicator. I think that anything that makes you a better communicator will make you better at almost everything that you do, because you're going to have to work with people if you want to grow a business. And there are some folks who, to be honest, I think will learn through doing that they don't want to do it. Yeah. And that is okay too. Like, I feel like not everybody has to become a great leader and a coach. And I think that is the message that people are hearing a lot of. And they're saying, hey, I don't enjoy this. I don't really want to enhance these skills. There is nothing wrong with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, go pick up the book, Who Not How, by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. And that's it. If you don't have the capacity, like I'm thinking of one person who I used to coach with, who honestly she's like, I just want to be on the beach. I want this organization to run like a well-oiled machine, and I don't want to have to touch it. And there's nothing wrong with that approach. The only thing is it demands that she find a right-hand person who can be responsible for that organization at the same or a higher level that she would. Yes. And that means she does still have to learn how to find that person. Now, she could go hire a headhunter, just pay somebody to go find that person. That's totally fine. That might be her who that finds the who that solves all the problems.
Yeah. And it's understanding what is required to meet that goal and pursuing that, because I think you're actually misdirecting and you're doing everyone a disservice if you're trying to step into that role and you actually really don't want to do it. And you're just going to be, it's almost like you're sabotaging yourself by doing it. But also, like, having that clarity on what exactly is the goal of the business, I think is key, because I came to the realization pretty early in my business that I don't want to have a big team. But everyone talks about growing, scaling. And I go, look, I've managed a team of 9. I don't want to do that again. I really don't. I love my team. I said, I want to manage a team of like 3. And if we go, and I don't want to go too many layers where I feel like I have no visibility on what's going on and no influence. I enjoy knowing a little bit of the details and knowing what's going on with clients. So I don't want to be too distant. So knowing that, I say, okay, then I understand the purpose of my business, where I would like to fit into it. And I'm building around that, as opposed to just following the advice of what I have to do to grow and scale to a multi 8-figure business. You don't have to do it that way. And that's the cool part. But I think that there's just a lot of influences hitting you saying, oh, you have to step into the role of a leader and you have to lead the team. And it's not for everybody. It's just not, it's a completely different skill set than what we're used to.
It's such a good point that it's a little obnoxious how every talking head on Instagram and everywhere else has the solution. Mm-hmm. And as if there is one right way to do business or one right way to motivate a team. And I'm like, you know what got you into business and what has, kept you in business? You and your style and the way that clients like to be communicated with, or the way that you're doing it and creating your product that works for you. So why wouldn't we follow that all the way out to what do you want this leadership to look like? When I work with a client for 12 or 18 months or longer, one of the things I'm always building in behind the scenes is what is the coaching and training model for this company? Like, how do we want this person to be brought into the organization and coached up into performance and loved on hard enough to really grow and thrive and become an entrepreneur in this organization? Or sometimes realize, oh, actually, we're not serving them and we do have to part ways. But what is the model that helps somebody come in and immediately take off through coaching, training, support, whatever that looks like? What do you want that to look like? Because again, what are the stakes for not doing that?
Exactly. It's so important to just be aware of that. And it's funny because you mentioned like all the talking heads on the internet, going back to just indulging it and saying like your word coaching that you hear all the time. And it's like, it's not really coaching. I hear scaling.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of the scaling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's not scaling, that's growing. Doing more and making more and building more isn't scaling. Scaling is simplifying. And that's the thing. It's actually simplifying. It's not adding. Scaling is done through subtraction, not addition. And that's the funny thing is people are building completely unscalable businesses saying they are scaling. And I go, but you are still the one talking. You are still the one.
Scaling,
you are scaling my business that's named after me. and I'm like, that's the hard thing is like, you're not really scaling. And there's nothing wrong with not scaling. There is nothing wrong with not scaling. No. Scaling is one thing you can do. It's one option. It's one staircase to climb. But you don't have to choose it. But I think that people feel this pressure to say I'm scaling and therefore I am worthy of the growth I'm getting, or I want to get the acknowledgement that I'm growing and scaling and doing all these things. It's not for everybody. And I'm the first one to admit, I say, guys, I'm not trying to scale. I'm not trying to scale my CFO business. I find that to be an intimate container that I want to serve in. I do not want to scale it. And that's almost taboo to say, which is really funny.
That is the truth, though, that it doesn't. So I haven't scaled my business by design either. I like to do bespoke coaching. I like to sit down with these business owners and go, what do you want? And not here's the package to get you everything you want without even asking. That's right. What's that old saying? Prognosis without diagnosis is malpractice. Like that, we can't just have a one-stop shop and solution for all problems if that's what you're going to solve. I mean, so there's no right way to do that. And if no one is leading you and extracting from you this vision and these deep desires and what that looks like, and then reverse engineering it into a plan, then it is time to hire somebody to help you do that.
Absolutely. Chris, I love this conversation. I could talk to you all day. I think I have at one point, but I want to tie a bow on this here because I know we could go on forever and I'm definitely going to have you back again for sure. Thanks. But could you just tell our listeners where they can find out more about what you have going on and hear more of your voice? Because I know you have your own podcast.
Well, thank you. Yes, it's very easy. Go to Goodman Coaching on Instagram or goodmancoachinginc.com. And you can, I'm easily accessible through there. I'm one of the few coaches who loves talking with people and connecting people. So if you found some value in this or you have questions, just go to the website. The first thing you're going to see is a work with me button. You can click that and that'll get you a direct line to me. And you're right. I also have a podcast called Bourbon and Breakthroughs. I'm in Louisville, Kentucky. It's like living in Napa and having, wine country. I live in Kentucky and we have bourbon country. So the whole thing of the podcast is I sit down with a guest, we open a great bottle of bourbon, and we relax and tell war stories about business and personal growth. And it's a ton of fun. And then we just did the live event that was also called Bourbon and Breakthroughs. But so if you're interested in those types of things, don't be a stranger. Come find me.
And guys, he will respond to you. Go find him. We're going to link everything in the show notes. Chris, thank you so much for your time today and joining us.
My pleasure. I look forward to next time.